is there's strategy involved in presenting an offer and receiving an offer when it's this wild of a market, right? You don't necessarily want to take a property off the market unless it needs to be taken off the market, right? So if you're on the receiving end of an offer, what is some good etiquette that you can give this group to make sure they're doing to be putting yourself in the best light? And then what are some of the strategies around that?
Well, the very, very first one is call the listing agent. You have to call the listing agent if you have the buyer, because you want to find out what terms are the best for that seller that your buyer may be able to accomplish in their offer. When can they close? Do we have a meeting of the minds there? What's the most important thing to this offer besides a high dollar amount is important to the seller? I have a buyer right now who was in a multiple offer situation. We are all in those situations. The agent on the other side was actually from our Gulf side office. And basically they accepted a cash offer, and my buyer was a first time buyer and she was not cash. I can promise you that. My strategy for her was, let's put in a backup offer, because it was just, there were 3 other offers. It was just important to let them know if something should happen, we are really serious about this home and we're not just throwing in offers to try to see if one will stick. We really liked this home. And so she went ahead and put in a backup offer. And I know it takes a little bit of time to do that, guys, but just do it, because that cash deal fell apart. The buyer decided the property was too small and we were first in line. So the other thing I'm going to tell you, and I wish I should play it for you because it's so stinking cute. Do a video rather than sending a letter. Do a video. Have the buyer talk about, hey, I'm so excited about your property. I'm a first-time home buyer. This is what I loved. I can see myself living in your house because of these reasons. I worked really hard for my down payment.
Yeah, emotion trumps the logic of the offer many times, doesn't it?
Yeah.
People really respond to that.
So, question, but is a backup offer the same paperwork as a regular offer?
Essentially, there is an addendum for the backup offer. So you could complete that backup offer. You would select the box on page 11, which is addendum W, backup contract.
Okay, thank you for that.
You're welcome. So what you would do is, what I normally do on the backup contract is, it's going to ask you, how long do you want to stand as a backup? And I normally will just put whatever an average inspection period is, or up to 15 days. And if you decide that you're going to find another house during that backup contract, then you just submit something in writing saying, we're taking our contract and canceling the backup. So, at least you're in first position, and especially if they accept that, because we were the first to get the phone call, are you guys still interested? And we were, and now she's under contract. We actually have inspection tomorrow. So
great advice and very timely, because we're seeing a lot of buyer remorse. Saying, yeah, I'll come to the closing with money, even if it doesn't appraise out, blah, blah, blah. And then reality is setting in and buyer's remorse is setting in, and they wish they wouldn't have gotten that bidding war sets in, and blah, blah, blah. So we're seeing this a lot more than we were a couple months ago. So just something to think about.
But you want to do everything you can in your power for that buyer. You want to get them in front of the seller. You want their personality to stand out, if they have a personality that, is a little bit fun or relational. So what my suggestion would be, escalation clause. Do a video, have them just do a quick video. It doesn't have to be long. And quite honestly, we have to have written permission anyways to disclose why a seller is selling and why a buyer is buying, or what they liked about it or what they didn't, because that could impact your negotiation position if too much is said. So make sure you're coaching them a little bit on what they're saying in the video as well, so that it's not impacting their negotiation position. Other things that you might want to do is just keep the contract as clean as possible. You don't want to have a 15-day inspection period, but you also want to call your inspector and make sure they can get it done in the time frame that you're putting on the contract. You also want to be aware that your loan approval, if you're doing a 30-day close, is the loan approval going to be due in 30 days, or are you going to fill in a lower number on that? Because you should be filling in a lower number on that. But before you even do that, you should be calling your buyer's lender to make sure that they can get it closed and get you that loan approval within that time frame. So you have some phone calls to make before you submit that offer. I would also probably put a larger escrow deposit down just so that they know they're serious. It's kind of a big deal. And as Jess and I had talked about before, you might want to do like a little funky number as your offer. You don't want to do a number that's like 250,000.
Well, this is funny because, and I think this is worth bringing up again when it comes to escalation clause or any of this. The agent on the receiving end doesn't want to look dumb. Human nature, right? So if you say, hey, do you understand escalation clauses? They're probably going to say yes. Just out of autopilot, right? Of course I know escalation. Well, most of them don't. And a lot of them actually believe the highest number wins. They don't understand it's an offer. They can choose whichever. And so a lot of people say $500 increments or $1,000 increments or $1,500 increments. Well, what if your increment was $1,250? It's a little different. So that for an agent that maybe isn't as educated would think, oh, wow, that's the unique one that wins. And yet what I would do is make sure you go into the conversation and explain the escalation and unwrap it. And if they interrupt you and say, yeah, I understand escalation, okay, move on. But most agents don't. And if you ask them a real broad question, like, do you understand escalation? Because there's an escalation clause, they're going to say yes, and they probably maybe don't. So just keep that in mind.
Right. Yeah.
Wait, why were you saying to do a different number?
So let's just say, for example, I'm going to go $10,000 above asking, and asking was 240, but I'm going to offer 250,000. Most other people are going to go in those common increments, 5,000, 2,000, 2,500, even numbers. If you know it's a hot property and people are probably going to go 10,000 above ask, why not go 12,300 above ask? Why not just put a little more interest in that number so that it stands out and you beat the other offers? You can do that with your escalation clause. If the buyer chooses not to do an escalation clause, then you can do that on your offer. I know Greg on the chat had just put something about seller will close out any and all open permits. So that's not exactly true. The seller doesn't have to expend any money to close out any permits. If there's any kind of building lien that's open, that has to be closed out, or contractor's lien, or any lien.
So he has FYI, title insurance does not cover permits. Right. In on page 11.
Yeah. So it doesn't
bite you, right?
Title will get you every time.
Yes, it will. You get one zinger and you learn, right?
It's a good point. The seller doesn't have to expend any money to close out permits. They just have to provide the documentation to the buyer and let the buyer decide what they want to do. It doesn't affect closing at all, though. You can still close if there's open permits.
You can, but then your buyer's stuck.
That's why the buyer has some decisions to make. However,
yeah. That's what I'm saying. No, a lot of folks think title insurance covers open permits, and they'll just bring it back.
No, it does not. That's a big mistake a lot of agents make. So that's definitely worth bringing up, as agents just assume that insurance covers any missed anything, which is not the case.
No, and that's why you want to look at the exceptions. That's a huge deal. The other thing is municipal lien searches. Make sure you guys are including the municipal lien searches because that's what's going to find the permits. I've actually had a title company tell me on a condo that they don't need to do a municipal lien search because the condo takes care of the water and the sewer and the trash in their HOA assessments or their condo assessments. And that was not true. There was something that was found on that municipal lien search that had to be addressed. So you need to educate your title company sometimes. You need to educate your lenders sometimes. Just make sure that you're kind of creating a timeline for everybody and that you're all on the same page and in agreement with those numbers. Because that's going to be important to keep the contract going without any hiccups.
I got a
So
little bit confused. I thought I understood it and now I'm confused. Isn't there on the contract that box that we check that says that the seller is responsible? That doesn't necessarily mean that the seller is responsible?
which box are you talking about?
I don't have one in front of me, but I know where you check any outstanding liens or whatever, the seller's responsible before closing or the buyer.
Yeah.
Did I
So
confuse myself somewhere along the lines?
that's another good point to bring up here. So there's a part of the contract where you'll check the box and that box says that the buyer shall pay for any assessments due after closing and the seller shall pay before, or the seller's just gonna be a nice person and pay it all before closing.
Right.
However, agents oftentimes mistake that as homeowners and condo association assessments, and that is also false. Those are municipal assessments that are special assessments. So the reason why I bring up special is because if you're in unincorporated Pinellas County, like, Tarpon Springs or even Palm Harbor, we all have an assessment for water for Swift Mud. But it's not a special assessment. That's a forever assessment and it's a municipal assessment. But it's not a special one where they're putting in new streetlights and they're asking homeowners to pay for that for 6 months or a year or whatever. And it's oftentimes found on the tax bill, not always, but oftentimes. So that's for municipal assessments though, from city, county government. It's not for homeowners or condo associations.
Okay, so you write that in separately. If you want to make sure that they're caught up on all that stuff, then you put it in separately.
So the condo writer and the homeowners association disclosure will have that information asking if there's assessments, and there's a box that you'll check. So make sure you guys aren't only reading your contract, but you're also reading the addenda, because again, they're not Mad Lib forms. Can get a little bit funny when you read them sometimes because you're like, what were they thinking? I do have a contract class coming up. I'm so excited.
I was just gonna say, who feels like they need to take a class with Toni?
And it's
Ask her questions for a couple hours.
I think it should include coffee or wine, one or the other, because this could go for hours.
right. Well, and that's the thing. I had that conversation with Kevin that, they were putting a 2-hour time spot. And I'm like, listen, I know I love to talk and tell stories, but if I just focused on the contract, because I sat in my office with another agent and it took us 5 hours.
Okay, that's a little much.
Well, but think about it though. You're going through 12 pages of the as-is.
Yeah.
Then you're going over the differences between as-is and standard and why that's important. Then you're going over all the addenda, and you're going over the KW addenda that Nikki's created for us. Please, guys, use Nikki's as-is repair addenda, because otherwise you have no guidelines as to what's going on for your repairs. And that's why she created it. She had that created for us to protect us and our buyers.
Every one of those extra sheets that she's paid attorneys to draft for you are because of lawsuits and problems that we no longer have to deal with. And so for an office our size to have as few of issues, knock on wood, something, right?
Knock it on wood.
Knocking on some wood, please. It is truly a miracle, but a lot of it's preempted in those extra files that are extra forms that we have created. And those were created by our attorneys for her.
Well, the E&O insurance we pay is low. I can tell you at my previous
Well, and it's
brokerage-
first coverage, first dollar coverage too.
Yeah, I paid
Wow.
$45 every transaction for my E&O, not every month, every single transaction. So
Ginger used to do, because I went to a couple of Ginger's classes where she did the contracts and what's the differences and that sort of thing. So maybe Toni could like do, not obviously nobody's gonna be able to sit there for 5 hours, but what if
and
we
I don't
broke
expect
it-
you to.
No, well, you probably don't want to do it for 5 hours, but what if we broke it up like into like 1 hour increments of different parts of the contract or something like that?
So
Yeah,
Kevin
the
and
hot
I are
topic.
working on that. We're really trying to work on that because we want people to get the whole class, but we don't want it to be like, okay, 2 hours this day, 2 hours that day, and they can't make it that day. So now they've missed some other crucial parts. So at what point do we break it up? And I think what we've kind of figured out is one class, let's go over the as is. The next class, go over the differences of the standard and then go over the addenda. And
I
think
like
that's
it.
the best way.
I think we need to book it, Dana.
Yeah, so my class is coming up. We'll put it on Facebook. It's mid-October, and it is a 3-hour class. I was able to push for another hour. And I think it's just good info, whether you're seasoned or not. It might be even a good reminder, or you forgot something, or there were changes that you didn't know.
Well, and I
So-
think what we should do is definitely record it in chunks so that if you wanted to watch it again later, or you didn't really want to go to as is, but you wanted this, you could zip over there. And I think that should be a commitment that we made. Thing is this is what I want to wrap with though. A technical market, that's what we're in right now, you guys. Technical, you've got to be savvy. The fact that you guys even know to do escalation clause is an unfair advantage. So make sure you're using it, and when you don't know, learn from each other, because that's the difference of getting your deals accepted, but also keeping them together. And when you can go through a contract as confidently as Toni and explain to your buyer or seller what's going on, how do you think they feel having you as their advisor? Right? Pretty dang good. Toni, love it. Love you. Thank you.
Love you guys.
You love contracts more than I do. Thank you for being in my life.
I'm such a nerd, I'm telling you.
If I was going into real estate sales with anybody, I'd be like, Toni, you want to write my offers? You want to be my partner? Love it. Thank you, Toni. You
You're
guys have a
welcome.
powerful Monday. Woohoo.
Bye,
There you
guys.
go. Bye, guys.
Thank you.